Hello kids, and welcome to my Cookie Club channel on YouTube. Today we're going to be making rosemary and walnut soda bread. Yum. I'd like you to first go and wash your hands, put on an apron, and then come back to me. Right, now you've washed your hands, I'd like you to start measuring out your ingredients. Your first ingredient, if you haven't already measured it out, is 225 grams of self-raising flour, and we're going to sieve this into a bowl. So get your bowl out ready, and once you've measured it, I'd like you to take the flour and sieve it in to your big bowl. Okay, do it a bit at a time so that it doesn't go everywhere. Lift it gently and gently tap it against your hand. At least that's the way I like to do it. If you have a wider neck bowl, that makes it slightly easier and means you're less likely to spill the flour over the edges. So keep going with the flour until it's all lovely and sifted. Now the idea behind sifting is, one, to make sure there's no lumps in your flour, though there isn't usually, but to create air into your recipe. As you sieve it, it creates air into it, which will help it to rise up. And we use self-raising flour today, which already has a certain amount of baking powder added to help it to rise, but we're going to be adding a bit more. As you would have seen at the beginning of the video, we're going to add a teaspoon of baking powder, and that will help it rise even more, because it's bread after all, but it's a yeastless bread. So we haven't got the yeast in it to help it to rise, so that's why we're using baking powder. But it means that it's a nice, quick, easy bread. And today we're going to be making one that is a lot less fat than ordinary bread. I've been trying to be a bit healthier lately, so I'm trying to add slightly less fat and sugar to some of my recipes. So we're adding a little bit less fat today. You can see this last bit having trouble getting through. As you can see, there are bits and pieces of the milled grain still left in there, and we don't need that in our recipe. Right, okay, the next thing I'd like you to add is your teaspoon of baking powder. So here's a teaspoon measurer, and we just want one whole one of those. And the way to do that is scoop it out of the bowl, flatten it off with your finger, and then tip it into your recipe. Okay, the next ingredient we're going to add is some rosemary and walnuts. So I am lucky enough to have rosemary growing in my garden, but not all of you will be. Here's what rosemary looks like, and it has a lovely distinctive smell. Can't really describe the smell, it just smells like rosemary. There's nothing else that smells quite like it. So we're going to be taking off these bits. The stalk is a bit too woody. In some herbs you use the stalk as well, but the stalk is a little bit too woody on rosemary to use. So we're going to pinch off the leaves. We need quite a lot of leaves, but I've already chopped some up into my tablespoon measurer. Now there's two ways of doing this. You can either chop it with a knife like this. Make sure that it's a knife that you're allowed to use, that isn't too sharp if you're a child. Otherwise get an adult helper to help you with this. Alternatively, you can get some scissors that you're allowed to use, and you can chop it with scissors. And this is my preferred way of doing it. When I'm teaching kids in my cookie club, it's much easier to have them using child-friendly scissors than to have lots of sharp knives around. So there we go. Chop that up. Make sure they're all chopped up fairly small so that you don't get a great big lump of rosemary. Rosemary is delicious, and when you cook it, the flavour is much more mild. So I'm going to need a little bit more in there. We want a nice tablespoon of rosemary, so I'm going to chop off a little bit more straight into my tablespoon measurer. Now if you've bought it from the shops, it might already be chopped up. It's better to use fresh if you can, but if you can't get hold of fresh, then you can use dried. There we go. There's a tablespoon. We'll just add that into our bowl. And now we'll add some walnuts. Now, these are pre-toasted walnuts. Now, the way I pre-toast walnuts is to put them into a hot frying pan just for a couple of minutes, shake them, make sure they don't burn. You can do it in the oven, but it takes quite a bit longer, so it depends how much time you've got. But I just did mine in a frying pan, and now I'm going to chop them up. We're not using an awful lot of walnuts, there's only 25 grams. So you want to have them small enough that you get a bit of walnut in some bits of walnut in every slice of your soda bread. If you just leave them in 6 whole walnuts, you might not get any walnuts in your slice. So there we go. That's my 25 grams of walnuts. And now I'm going to stir those through. So just gently, we don't want to knock out all the air that was sieved into our ingredients. Gently stir them through. Okay, when you think it looks like they're stirred through, it might take a moment or two. I want you to add the 25 grams of margarine. Now you can use any margarine you like. You can even use butter, but today I'm using a low-fat margarine because I want it to be that bit lower in fat. But feel free to use butter if you're not trying to lose weight like me. There we go. So we're going to, if you're using butter, you'll need to rub this in with your fingers because it will be much harder. This margarine is quite soft, so I can probably just stir it in. But to show you how to rub, it's like this. And you want to try and get that small amount of butter or margarine kind of all the way through your mixture. So make sure you give it a good rub or a good stir. And there's no need to get your whole hand dirty, so this area can stay fairly clean. You're just using your fingertips for this rubbing, and it's the same way that we make pastry and make breadcrumbs. There we go. Okay, so our next ingredient is buttermilk. Now, not all of us have buttermilk at home, so what you can do instead of buttermilk is have 100 ml of low-fat or no-fat yogurt, plain yogurt, not strawberry or blackcurrant, plain yogurt, absolutely plain, and a 50 ml of milk, whatever milk you happen to have in your fridge. So I have used 50 ml of semi-skimmed milk and 100 ml of no-fat yogurt. And that will make up a type of buttermilk. You just want a slightly sour milk. That's what buttermilk is really. And you want to pour that in. And except for seasoning, that is our last ingredient. So what I'm going to do is just give it a stir until the mixture comes together. Now, if it seems too dry, what you can do is add just a little bit more milk or water, if you prefer, until it comes together. But you don't want it to be too wet because it does need to hold its shape a little. So as long as you can bring all the ingredients together into a ball, then that's the right consistency. If it's way too wet, then I think perhaps you may have measured out the liquid slightly wrong, but it's okay, just add a little bit more flour. But if it's way too dry, then just add a few drops at a time of milk or water. But as you can see, that's all. If you're patient and keep going, it should all come together nicely like that. So I'm going to scrape down the back of my spoon. Right. As I said, there is one more ingredient, and that is seasoning. Now, you don't have to add any seasoning, but what people usually mean by seasoning when you see that in a recipe is salt and pepper. Okay, so I'm going to add just a little bit. Should have really added it slightly earlier. I forgot to add it in. Should have added it after I added the rosemary and the walnuts, just to make sure it goes through the whole recipe. But I'll give it a good squish together until it's come together. Right, and now some salt. Not too much salt, just a few shakes or a pinch of salt. There we go. And I'm just going to mix that in a little bit. As I said, you should really add the seasoning a little bit earlier. But providing you give it a good mix, it'll still go through the ingredients. Right. As you can see, that's formed a type of bread dough, which is perfect for what we want. So what I'm going to do now is shape the dough into a circle about 18 centimetres round, or 7 inches round, and I'm going to place it onto a non-stick baking sheet. Now this sheet, I've just added a sheet of non-stick baking foil to it, just to keep my baking sheet clean really, and we want to make sure it doesn't stick. There we go. Right, so as I said, it wants to be about 18 centimetres round, and that looks like this. Flatten it out very slightly, and then you're going to score it into 8 pieces. There we are. If you want to make sure it's 18 centimetres round, you can of course use a tape to do that. There we go. I think that looks just about perfect. So I'm going to now use a knife, and I'm going to score it into 8 pieces, just gently like this. As you can see, it's not a very large loaf of bread. It's quite a small loaf of soda bread. There we go, but perfect for a weekend morning and so quick to make. Now I'm going to pop that into a preheated oven. So gas mark 7, 200 degrees for a convection oven, or 200 degrees for a fan oven, which is what I have. And it should take about 20 to 30 minutes, and it will come out and it'll be golden brown. And if somebody lifts it up, obviously you need to be wearing an oven glove, and taps it on the bottom, it should sound hollow, just like when you're making bread. And then it is perfectly done. Leave it to cool just a little, and then cut it up, or maybe put some butter on it, or whatever you fancy. Some cheese would be nice on it with some pickle. Absolutely delicious, and I hope you enjoy it. And I will be back shortly once it's lovely and golden brown, and show you how it looks. Thank you very much. See you in a minute. Okay, so it's now out of the oven. As you can see, it's golden brown, and when I turn it and tap it, it sounds hollow, so it's perfectly done. And that did indeed take about 25 minutes, I would say. I'm just going to cut into this. Let's have a look how it looks inside. There we go. It's quite a dense type of bread, and as I say, that would be perfect with just some butter on it, or if you like, a slice of cheese and some pickle. A lovely healthy soda bread. I hope you've enjoyed making this soda bread with me today. Please feel free to like it if you do, and if you'd like to join me for some more recipes, and log in each week and see what I've been up to. Thanks very much. Have a nice day. Bye bye.